Satnam, yogis and yoginis, hello and welcome. Welcome back to the stream. I am back from holidays and I am ready to start streaming on a regular schedule again. And yeah, it's been nice a few weeks of being away from technology mostly and with the family. And now I have my batteries charged and I'm looking forward to doing a lot of videos. Today we're going to conclude the last part on number 5, and we will start next week with something different. Maybe I will mention it later. But today, because number 5 is the word, we have been exploring a lot of things about number 5, but 5 being in essence the word and linked to communication. I thought it would be great that we explore some of the rules of communication. And I will not be so explicit about numbers in relationship to these rules, but the numbers are going to be behind what I'm going to be saying, and they're going to guide the conversation to talk about how a conversation and a communication can become conscious and dharmic, or how we can make it into something karmic. So we will explore the do's and the don'ts, sort of like the yamas and the niyamas of communication. So that's what is ahead of us for today in this video. And just to mention that some of the concepts that I extract from here come from the teachings of Kundalini Yoga, from the level 2 particularly, and there are 2 level 2s which are very connected to this concept of communication. One is called literally conscious communication, the other one is called authentic relationships, and they are like 6 days in length each of them. So this is 12 days of teachings which are amazing. Today we're only going to do a little overview of like being very superficial about some basic rules that I get from there, and also others that I have observed or that I have learned from Shiv Charan Singh or that I have just observed by myself. So that's my intention for today. So let's explore this. And I think it's always nice if we put it on paper. It helps to visualize it and to get it more clear, the idea, the general feeling of it. So let's put it on paper. Wait, sorry, my camera was not fully adjusted. All right. Okay, so we are going to do the do's and the don'ts. The do's and the don'ts. And I'm also going to separate some of these concepts with time, in relationship to time. So the first ones that I'm going to be exploring, they are going to be before we engage into the communication or during the first stages of the communication. So this is going to be the before. And then the during, it's going to become later on. But let's go into this. So one of the main things about communication is even before we actually speak, this is the listening, active listening actually. I sometimes make the joke that in Spain we have a very fast way of communication. We not only talk very fast, but also there is a big directionality to the communication. So it could be that somebody is speaking and they haven't finished speaking and we're already starting to reply. And then I'm already answering when they stop speaking and they are listening to what I'm saying. They decide what they want to say and then they start replying before I finish speaking. So it can be like we are both speaking at the same time. This can be really, really, really quick. And it has its pros and its cons. But definitely one of the cons of this kind of communication is that you don't really fully listen to what the other is saying and processing it before replying, but it's much more automatic. And we are not going to explore today the rules of automatic communication. It's the rules of conscious communication. And for consciousness to be there, there has to be a little bit of space to stop and to properly listen. Now you can do that, speak in Spanish as well, but it's just the rhythm is going to be higher. So you have to be much more on your toes when you speak. But in general, let's say, there has to be an active part of myself, an active effort on myself to listen to what the other one is saying. As opposed to what? Well, as opposed to, one example would be, you're speaking and I'm already thinking what I'm going to reply. So I'm busy about thinking what my reply would be rather than busy listening to you. So it's worrying about what do I want to do, what do I want to bring, what do I want to impose in this communication, which means that a part of you wants to control. So the don'ts, I would say, don't try to control. Yeah, I'm going to just say control here. And mainly part of the control comes from a place in us that is, it could be insecurity as well, but it could be like, I want to bring this, I have a point that I want to get across, so I'm going to make my point. And you try to, excuse me, force the communication in a certain direction so that you can get your point across. And that's even, I mean, why am I writing this before here? Because you're already trying to get somewhere. You're trying to get to a certain objective, like getting your point across, and you're not even getting the space ready. This readiness is very important. This would be related to the 4 and the 6, but I mentioned I would not go too much into the numbers. But the 4 and the 6, the question of 4 and 6 is when. So when are you ready to engage into a particular topic? And you have to sense that. And if you are not actively listening, you cannot evaluate and you cannot judge that. So now, as I am listening, as we are listening to the other one, we can listen in a certain mode. Part of us will want to notice, oh, that's different from me, because the tendency of the mind is to compare. And generally when we compare their point of view to my point of view, we do it so that we find ways in which we are different, disagreements. Yeah, what are we disagreeing on? What is their, let's say, their faulty logic on what they are saying? You know, like you are taking notes rather than listening to actively engage into some sort of exchange. You are listening for something that you disagree with. You're listening for something that is faulty or is wrong, so that you can later on, when it's your turn to speak, you can throw it in their face or something like that. So that's one of the don'ts. The do's would be, if you are going to be actively listening, first of all, try to find some common ground. The very root of common would have to give you a clue of, look, this is what we are doing. Communication is about something in common. We're going to be sharing some common ground. And no matter how crazy the argument of the other person is, no matter how far away the other person is in the spectrum of what you find rational to yourself, there's got to be some point in some place that we share in common. So if we are going to have a dialogue and we want it to be a constructive dialogue, this is not like some kind of battle of wills, where we try to prove that we are right and the other one is wrong. If we want to engage into some sort of dialogue, the two of us, we're going to need some common ground to establish the foundations of the communication. So finding that common ground is always useful, and it's generally useful to start from there. Okay, so what do we agree on before we go into the disagreements? And there's going to be disagreements, and that's fine, and it's actually healthy to have some disagreements. If we never talk to people who disagree with us, we're never going to grow. Because if everybody we talk to agrees with what we think, that means we are in the realm of the familiar and the known. And that means your comfort zone. that means you are not getting out of your comfort zone, which means you are not growing. So if we want to grow, we need to expose ourselves to people who think differently from us. And if they think differently from us, there is going to be things in which we don't agree initially. And so disagreements are important. But if you start the communication, and remember, this is the before, so if you start the conversation from a place of disagreeing, then it's much more likely that it's going to go into a battle of wills than instead of a dialogue where we can get something out of that exchange. It's not going to be nurturing. It's going to be trying to destroy the other's arguments or something like that. So start from finding the common ground, and this would be, I would say, it's part of the building rapport. Yeah, and empathy with the other one. If there is no rapport and empathy, the communication is going to be very harsh. You're going to just make your chances of a successful communication much harder. So finding this sort of rapport and empathy at the very beginning of the conversation is key. Sometimes if it's a difficult subject that you have to approach, or an intimate and subject that the other one will feel vulnerable, it may take 20 minutes, it may take 25 minutes to actually find this kind of rapport and empathy. And sometimes you have to go through layers of small talk to get there. And understand that that's fine. Sometimes it's necessary to go into those layers of small talk. We'll talk more about this necessity of small talk in a few minutes. But sometimes it's necessary to build enough rapport so that, and the other one to open up themselves so that we can both go together into this more vulnerable space where we can explore the disagreements and hopefully grow, all of us. So building this rapport and this empathy is important. And the empathy implies neutrality, empathy. Because there is apathy, sympathy, antipathy, and empathy. There's 4 different kinds. It's not apathy. Apathy would be like, I don't care about what of the other one. I don't care. We have a conversation, but if they feel offended by what I say, I don't absolutely care. Now, I think that's a position that if you start from there, you're going to have a lot of opposition. Okay? It's a position of opposition, let's say. If you want to engage into a healthy dialogue in which hopefully we can all grow, even if let's say you have a perspective or an understanding of, you have something that is very valuable to the other person and you think they could really benefit and you want them to benefit from that, if you come from this place of opposition and apathy, if you don't care about them and you just throw things out, even if there is truth in what you are saying, they're going to, by feeling harmed, they're going to close themselves up. So what do you want? Do you want to be the winner of the conversation, of the argument, right? That's not a dialogue, that's an argument. Or do you actually want to have some dialogue? And through that dialogue, be open to the possibility that maybe something of what you think is right may not be so, and you need to recalibrate yourself. But you can get that only through empathy, not sympathy, because sympathy, it clouds us. When we go into sympathy with somebody else, it doesn't allows us to see things as they are, because we start to resonate with what the other one is saying, and and agreeing with that, but in a way that you don't consider, how do you say that? Blind spots. Yeah, we all have blind spots in our periphery, and when we go into sympathy, it's easier to have blind spots that we don't consider. And antipathy either. Antipathy would also be like against the other one. The other one is feeling an emotion, and you're reactive in a pulling away sense from that emotion, and so you have antipathy for what they are saying. Well, that's also not going to be healthy. So whatever the don'ts aspects here are going to be the apathy, antipathy, and the sympathy. Yep. And through this building a point of common ground and finding the right empathy and rapport, this is all the way to prepare for when we are ready. And what we shouldn't do, the don't would be the push. Push towards, push the other one, push yourself to a moment when the conversation is not yet ready to move to the details and to the points that have to be discussed, but you want to push to get there. So this would be the befores, let's say. And the before can be during the conversation. It could be like the initial stage. It doesn't have to be before talking. We are already talking, but we are building rapport, we're finding the common ground, and we're getting ready. The ready is the when. When are you ready? And when the when happens, when is the right moment, then we move to the during phase. And now we're going to be engaging into the conversation. Now, some of the things that I write here, they may be also during the before. But one of the most basics that I would like to write is just be curious. We are just two human beings, and we are meeting maybe for the first time, maybe not. But can we just be curious of each other? Can we just want to know more about them and be interested? And imagine that you are like an interviewer, right? Or you are interviewing for a magazine and you want to know what's their life about. Especially, if it's the first time that you meet them, what would you like to know? And just be curious about it, which is the opposite of trying to be some sort of therapist or teacher, lecturer, yeah? How often we approach when somebody comes with their issues or their life or their problems, we go with our solutions, right? Oh, what you have to do is blah, 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 blah. So we start giving all these suggestions and counseling. It's not our role, unless it is our role. And if it's our role, that would have to be the right setting. Somebody has paid you some money for you to do counseling or to do some sort of consulting for them or therapy for them or whatever. And then that's the role that you are having. But if we are engaged in a communication, basic dialogue, we should approach from a place of neutrality and just be curious. If we approach from the place of the therapist and the teacher, the one who is giving suggestions and what you should do is, what you must do is, then a number of things happen. But one of them is, first, if they actually do what you are telling them to do, the karma, the result of those actions is for you. So if I say to somebody, what you should do is A, B, and C, if that person does A, B, and C, the result of doing A, B, and C, the outcome and the consequences of that karma goes to me because I told the person to do it. They will have their karma as well for following suggestions or whatever we want to call it, but part of that karma is for me. Now, because we always approach it from a yogic perspective where we want to avoid generating karma and we want to live a dharmic lifestyle, then a dharmic rule of communication would be not to give suggestions, not to give counseling, not to give orders of what to do, not to tell people what to do. And that's a really important one. And some people have really struggle with this. They, as soon as you start telling them something, they are telling you what you have to do. And, very often what we want is somebody to listen to us. Not necessarily we want somebody to fix our lives. But if we try to rescue the other, fix the other, this is all going with the mind games of the rescuer, the fixer. If we go into these mind games, it's just the other one is not gonna feel that they are being listened to, and they may appreciate and thank you because you are paying attention to them, but it's not gonna be helpful. Even worse, if it creates a certain form of dynamic that repeats again and again. So, for example, somebody is has some issues and they feel very strong negative emotions, and they go to somebody else, and the other person is always there trying to fix them, trying to help them. And they create this dynamic where one is the complainer and the victim and the not nagging, but problems and so on. And the other one is, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. And they dedicate so much time and they put so much energy into this kind of communication that is neither helpful to one, because it just perpetuates this position of victim, neither helpful to the other one, who is accumulating karma through telling the other one everything that they should do. So it's much healthier to bring the conversation to a conscious state in which everybody is responsible of their actions and we can both relate in a neutral position, which doesn't mean that I'm not going to feel empathically what the other one is feeling. I mentioned the empathy is there, but I'm not going to go down into the hole of the negativity of what the other is saying, for example. Yeah. It doesn't have to even be negative. Maybe they are just expressing something in their life and the other one is already trying to fix it. It's not a problem, I'm just sharing this. The other one is already trying to fix it. That's so very common, especially for some people that I meet, because I am a yoga trainer, so I train teachers and consultants. So I'm very often surrounded by people who are already that they have a tendency towards being a therapist or a teacher. So they do this very, very well, and they forget to just be neutral and be curious. We should this neutrality. So one of the key elements of the one who is trying to fix the other is that they tell the other person what to do. And kind of the opposite of that, one of the do's of communication is to ask questions. Ask questions. So rather than telling the other what you think, often it can be also a way to mask your way of fixing them, right? So how about just sharing rather than just sharing and asking questions? Let's put it both together. And in the don't, apart from all this, we would avoid the assuming. So what am I writing here? First, we assume they mean this thing, and we assume also that this may be the problem. We assume this is the issue, and then we tell them what they have to do. First of all, if it's not explicit in the way they said something, ask, because assuming puts you in the position of your experience from your own mind, and most of the time it's not going to be exactly the way things have happened or the way you are perceiving them. And sometimes you can be really way, way off by this assuming. So rather than assume, just ask and find the common ground again. So go back to this common ground, deciding that, this is the issue that is happening to them because it's happened to me and I know what they have to do. That's just getting out of neutrality and you are not ready to receive what they are saying. You're not actively listening, you are thinking of your own history. So a good approach is always ask questions, make sure that you understand, and being the mirror to the other. So like saying, okay, so I'm hearing this from you, is that correct? But my perception of what you are saying. So reflecting back what you heard, it's a good way to check that we are in the same page. Only when we are clear about this, then we can move on in a certain direction. But it's better to spend more time than necessary asking questions than assuming too much, going in a direction, losing the empathy that you had built along the way, and or maybe going in a completely different trajectory that is going to consume a lot of time and waste energy in the conversation. So ask more questions. However, it should not be all the time, so don't ask questions all the time. There's some people, you just ask them something and they reply with an answer. What do you think about that? And you're like, oh, come on, give me your take. I'm asking you, can you please reply? Well, what would you have if I replied? What would that then make any difference if I reply? You're like, oh, come on, we cannot have a conversation like this, right? So there has to be a back and forth. There has to be a continuous dialogue. It's not one is asking too many questions. Every time you ask something, they reply with a question. That's also the sign of a teacher or a therapist, but these ones, the wrong kind of therapist and teacher. So there's this sharing as well. I mentioned asking questions to find the common ground, but also sharing when you have something to share, not teach, but to share, not preach, right? But sharing something, then do it with no agenda. Yeah. You may feel it sometimes that somebody's telling you a particular story in their life, but with a hidden agenda to manipulate you into thinking or doing a particular thing. So if you're going to be sharing, just share. And if it's related to their story, you can just say like that, oh, something happened to me and it was kind of similar, I believe. Let me share how it was. You can just say like that, but not like out of the blue bringing this story that hopefully is going to manipulate them into doing something that you want. So hopefully through this asking questions and this sharing, we are creating some sort of flow in the communication between both of us. And if it's a communication, there should be a bidirectional flow, in both directions. So it's not just a monologue. We're not just telling them the other, but we are going back and forth. Now, when this flow is established, and also to establish this flow, it's good to avoid interrupting. Now, interrupt, this is something I was saying when we speak in Spanish. It doesn't feel like interrupting necessarily, because we know the other one is finishing their thought and we already start with our thought. Again, that's not great because there's not much active listening in that, but it can happen in your culture. It might be the same as mine. So I would understand. However, interrupting is different. Interrupting is somebody's saying a thought and you cut it to bring a point because you have something urgently that you want to say. Now, interruption means that you are not listening. Yeah, when you are interrupting, you have something you want to say. It is just showing that you are not actively listening. Or let's say you've been actively listening until you have something you want to say and you just say it and you cut the other one. Now, I'm not saying never interrupt. Interrupting sometimes is necessary, especially if the other one is going into a place that is harmful to the conversation, let's say, and to the neutrality of what we are holding or whatever. It may be necessary to interrupt, but it should be used consciously. And the thing about interruptions, they are generally used unconsciously. You just want to say something and wow, you cut the other one and get in. Now, that's generally not useful to the conversation. It's much worse if it's a man. So a man, because we have one track, the mind concentrates on one thing at a time, and women have this mind that can hold 6 things at the same time in their mind. Men don't. Men have one. So if we are speaking something, we are telling a story, or we're sharing something, and we are in this one track, when this track is interrupted, it feels like too much. So it can be a very stressing experience for a man when he is interrupted. So bear it in mind, if you are talking to a man, interrupting him, 1 time, 2 times might be okay, but if you interrupt too much, you're gonna go into danger of losing any empathy you may have built, and they may get very defensive, and they may either shut down, they may shut down the conversation, or they may get angry. That's a very common reaction from being interrupted. It's linked to the 1 and the 9. Is the penetrative impulse. Yeah, that's a very male energy, the 1, the penetration, the wanting to penetrate. And if the man is speaking and you penetrate the conversation with your input that you want to say before they have finished, before they get to the 9, right? You start in the 1, and before he gets to the 9 and you penetrate the conversation, the man doesn't like being penetrated. So there is this male-to-male reaction that I'm talking about energies that is going to create this feeling, you are cutting me, right? And it's going to bring the wild man, the 1 and the 9, the wild aspect, and I don't like it. They may not be conscious why, but if you interrupt too much, they may feel like we are getting into a battle, and then that's not a dharmic communication. So we establish this flow and we hold it without interruption, hopefully. Now, another thing that this is one thing that I remember when I was 18 years old, 17 actually, and I when I moved out to live by myself from living with my parents for the first time when I was going to university, and I did a list of things that I would like to do for myself, and I remember this one was very interesting. When I put a number of things. One of the things that I wrote for myself, these were the rules for my new life, the way I created them. One of them was not to talk about anyone's back. Sorry, not to talk about anyone at their back. Yeah, is it? Am I saying it right? I'm not sure if that's the right expression in English. So behind their back. That's the word. So not to speak about anyone behind their back. That was the way I put the rule. Now, it has evolved a little bit since then, hopefully. And the way I understand it now is if we're going to speak about somebody behind their back, let's put it like this. Don't say anything that you would not say if they were present. So if imagine that person was present, how would you say it about them? So if you're going to speak about somebody, don't say it in such a way that you know if you said it in their presence, they would get offended. So let's say... let's just say respectful, which should be in general for whether they are in person or not. I'm going to write behind their back, and you understand what I mean. Yeah, not to speak behind their back as if they, as because they are not here, I can say whatever I want, but rather speak as if they were in front of us. Now, that would also mean this respectful includes a lot of things, not just about the behind their back, but it would also include respectful of their culture. Just like I mentioned some subtleties about Spanish culture, there is other cultures where you have to be respectful of how they communicate. One example would be when I was in Japan, I made a number of mistakes in my way of communicating because of some cultural things that I totally was not aware of. So, for example, I remember going in the street, there was these young girls or young women, I don't know, who were waiting for the bus, and I was looking for something, and I approached them and I asked them something directly. And I could notice in their body language that they were not welcoming my approach to ask them something. So I should have just stepped out at that very moment when I noticed the body language. Because I had already approached them, I decided to ask the question anyway. Now I asked a question that they didn't know. And they didn't know what I was asking them, or they didn't know the answer, but they couldn't say no. It's something about how they felt that it would be disrespectful towards me. This is the respectful part. If they said no to me, but they wanted to say no, but they couldn't say no. So, and then you enter into this safe face kind of situation, and how can we conclude this in a way that everybody retains their honor or something like that? It may be much simpler than when I'm expressing in this situation, and this was a very silly situation with, approaching these young women in the street, but it can be much deeper. Safe face is very important in some cultures, and the way we talk, the way we express things, or the way we ask direct questions in the West, they may be perceived like too strongly for somebody in a different culture. So to be aware of this. We cannot be aware of what we don't know, but be aware that different culture may be expressing in different ways. So, yeah. All right, let's carry on. Now, another rules of communication, today it's a new day. And don't relate to the other one the way they were yesterday. What I mean by this is people change. And this can be really difficult to accept, particularly when we are communicating with people within our own families. It's very common to you live distant from your family, and you spend 6 months away, and you have been doing your own maturity. You've been growing, and you've been changing your way of thinking and behaving and believing. And 6 months later, you go back to some festivity, and they are going to treat you exactly like you were when you were little, because that's what they know, and that's the image that they have in their head. So when they treat you the way you used to be, or the way they treat the person that you used to be, it's a temptation to trigger the old patterns, which is really great to test whether we have really learned something or not. But that's a clue to let us think that when we approach somebody we haven't seen for a while, to take them as somebody new. Because, in 6 months, people can go through experiences and make radical changes in their life. And part of us may be antipathetic or sympathetic to what they were before, and we hold these grudges, or we hold these whatever towards the other person. And when we come today, we have this history behind. Can we approach the today as a new day? And can I find out today who you are as a new day? And be open to a new communication. So to not see the other for what they did, but for what they are right now. Now, that can be difficult if in the past there were some challenges in the communication between two people, and also if they did something that hurt you, or you were harmed in some way. So what I'm saying is the teachings of yoga teach forgiveness. They don't teach forgetfulness. Yes, I forgive the other person for whatever happened, and it may take time to forgive, okay? Some people are faster than others. Particularly, I'm quite slow. It takes me a while to fully process whatever happens and to let it go. But that's my aim, to continuously being in that, learn to forgive. That doesn't mean forget. So even if I am approaching somebody from the position of where are we today, and I'm not going to hold them to their history, let's say, I'm not going to put it in in front as a wall. However, if that person, let's say, betrayed my trust, or if that person took advantage of me, or they took advantage of a situation, and as a result, we felt damaged in some particular way, we are going to be careful, right? Conscious and careful. It doesn't mean I'm going to be afraid of being abused, and so I'm going to set up all these barriers that I'm going to difficult the communication. However, I'm going to be very, very careful of how do I engage and how do I allow the trust to flow. Trust has to be earned, and it may take a long time to earn the trust with somebody, and it may take one word to break that trust. So let's be very aware of that. We are building this trust, all this rapport and empathy, all this common ground. This is all helpful to build the trust so that we can open ourselves. And that trust can go out of the window in one sentence, one word sometimes, or one communication. And then it's really difficult to get it back. But that's the thing. Even if you forgive whatever was said, now we have to start again. Now you have to prove to me in a way that you are willing to engage into a trustworthy communication. So can I trust you? You're going to have to earn that trust as well, again, right? And it may take time. It may take years to achieve it. But at least not be holding back to that grudge of whatever happened. Yeah, so that's and not holding the grudge and forgiveness doesn't mean that you give a blank check to the other one. It means everybody's accountable of their actions and responsible, and everybody should take responsibility. If they don't take responsibility, I'm going to be very restrictive in how much willing I am to go with this communication. Well, how far are we going to go if you don't accept responsibility for what you did or for what you said, right? So we don't forget, even if we forgive, still people are responsible. It's not about who is guilty, but there is some responsibility. Now, okay, so these things also, some of these rules of communication that I am exploring, they are particularly strong in a couple. This is particularly important for a couple. Maybe I point out a few of them, but this is one very important one. In a couple, you have to build the trust, and that's really, it takes a long time to build this trust. And something that we see very often is the confident becomes the critic. So let's say if I'm sharing something to my wife, and I am sharing something that is very deep for me and even very secret, something that is I haven't told anyone, I feel vulnerable by sharing this, and because we have created some intimacy and some trust, I can open up and I say that. And then 2 years later, in a moment when there is some form of argument or some form of dialectic battle or whatever, the other one is going to utilize that information and abuse it to take advantage and throw it at you in the worst possible way. So this person was my confidant, and then confident is linked to the very word is linked to the word trust. So in the root of the word, so you have trusted in the other one, you share something that makes you vulnerable, and then the other one takes advantage to really poke you and in a place that is painful. So that's when, if that happens, that's terrible for the couple. So we should be very, very aware within a couple that when something is shared in the vulnerable space of intimacy, that trust is respected. Because if you violate that trust in that time, it may be really, really hard to go back to that space of trust, because that's when you finally open yourself and you got vulnerable. That's a really tricky one to come back from. So that's an issue that happens mostly in couples, but the rules of communication are universal, not just for couples. But maybe I can carry on with a few more that are for the couples. So let's write the one I was just saying. So engage into this trustworthy communication, and don't, how did I say that? The confident becomes the critic. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah, don't betray the trust of the other one. Yeah. Now, let's write a few that are for couples. These ones are especially good for couples. Let's say another very good rule of communication in a couple is for every one negative communication, 5 or 6 minimum positive ones. So if we are in a relationship, in a long-time relationship, it doesn't have to be a sexual relationship, but especially in relationships, then if sometimes we have things to talk and some things which trigger negative emotions. If a negative communication has to be engaged, make sure that it's balanced always. And it cannot be balanced, one good for one positive. That's far too low. We humans have this thing when they tell us something wrong, it sometimes gets really stuck inside. And they can tell us a few good things, but something wrong is going to get stuck in us. So make sure that that we engage in, let's say, at least minimum 5, but more than 5 positive, enhancing communications. If we are in a relationship, then we are going to talk about things that are positive, also about the relationship, at least 5 before we actually talk about something that needs to be changed and something that may be negative, that contains some negative charge and it may trigger some powerful negative emotions. So this rule of 5 or 6 to 1, that's quite an important one, because otherwise what this very, very easily becomes is nagging and complaining. Yeah. And this often creates a certain dynamic. It's generally one of the couple who is the one who is nagging and is complaining and it goes into this kind of mode, and the other one trying to appease and trying to satisfy and trying to change things so that the other one is happy. Because if it's very depressing and it's a very uncomfortable feeling to be with somebody who is constantly in that state of negativity. So you want to make things better, and that can also lead to avoiding conflict. And if you avoid conflict through lack of communication, then that creates another problem. Yeah, don't avoid. Communicate. The rules of communication is actually to communicate. And the thing with avoiding is, let's say the other one is nagging and complaining and so on. And if it's a constant thing, you never find the proper balance, and you just want to stop. And then you avoid confronting certain things that are negative. But the more you avoid, the less communication there is, and the more the other one is going to feel negative emotions, and the more they're going to go into this nagging and complaining. So actually avoid is one of the things that we shouldn't do, because avoid tends to lead to an accumulation. Accumulation of things that are like a list of things that which I am painful about, and I am not talking about them. The other one is nagging and complaining. I'm not going to talk about what worries me, because I don't want to be the nagger and complainer. So, but then if you don't speak about it, what do you do with that? And we could accumulate it, or we can let it go. But the tendency, especially in relationships, is we accumulate it until we cannot anymore, and then we explode. So this is accumulation towards explosion or implosion, right? And with the implosion, it's just like you're in a black hole, and that's also not good for the relationship anyway. But yeah, avoiding the communication is just going to lead to accumulation, an explosion, or a frustration, an inner hole, and then an implosion. So not healthy. But then if you have to communicate, then you have to try to ensure that there is this proportion of 5-1. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to say 5 good things about you and then I'm going to say a bad thing about you. That doesn't mean that. It means 5 different moments during the day, week, that we are communicating well in a good, with a good dynamic and flow, and then one moment when we are going to have a difficult conversation, and we need to talk about that thing which is it's going to create some negative emotion. So if we have created the other 5 or 6 or more, then it's going to be easier than if we just go straight with the one negative and then another negative and then another negative and then another negative. So that's the idea. And this, I understand, these are rules of communication. These are wonderful, but they are not easy to do, right? I'm not saying this is easy. This is tough. This is very challenging, especially when you are in a couple, when the sexual tension can, the tension of the sexual tension also manifests in other ways. So one of the ways is that, we are, particularly if it's in a couple, so because we were talking about couples, then enjoy the polarity. There is a certain polarity, yin and yang, in all couples. And can you enjoy that without making it a war? Because when there is a certain polarity, there is a tendency to war. One example of this polarity is often that one is more rational and intellectual, and the other one is more emotional and non-rational. And when there is, which is beautiful and it's great, we all have this polarity within. When it manifests outside, can we find a way to enjoy that polarity and keep a good flow and a good communication? Or is that going to become a war? Yeah, and the one who is rational wants to be right because that's rational, and the one who is emotional is like, you don't understand me because you don't understand how I'm feeling, and then there is no proper communication. Nothing is going to be solved. You're not going to go anywhere. Even if you the rational wins the battle because you are right, you will lose the war because you are not building something together with the other one. You may prove your point if there is such a point, but doesn't help. So, and the same from the perspective of the non-rational. Yeah, you may throw a tantrum and get what you want, but is that going to help? Are you building trust to build something together? So this following this number of rules can help so that we can enjoy the polarity, the yin and the yang, and keep building trust. Yeah. Another thing that helps if we have to talk about some issue, there is this concept of divide and conquer. So one thing at a time rather than all at once. Because let's say we have been building a number of good communications throughout the week. We've had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different moments of the week when we were communicating, and it was great, and it was flowing, and it was nice, and we felt the love and the respect and the caring. And then when we have the one moment when we have to sit and communicate, don't try to fix all the problems at once. Communicate on one thing, concentrate on one thing. Let's talk about this issue, let's deal with it. If we try to bring everything else at once, it's just overwhelming. So one thing at a time, deal with it, talk about it, resolve it, take as much time as it's needed to find some resolution. And the resolution will depend on having some common ground, because in the resolution of the issue, there has to be some common ground at the beginning. But if you do reach that end and you have found the resolution, then after the resolution, you let it go. We talked about it, we dealt with it, we agreed, that's what's going to happen from now on, we let it go. We don't keep bringing the past. Because you did this once and you said this once, well, didn't we already talk about it? Why do we have to talk about it again? So if we deal with it, one thing, we let it go, that's it, one less issue to talk about. In the future, we will deal with another one. If we try to talk all at the same time, it's just not going to work. It's going to be too much. And if we keep repeating it, well, didn't we already talk about it? Okay, can we just let it go? It's done. It's talked, it's dealt with. You know, we wash our hands, that's it in the past. We don't need to discuss it again. And truly leave it and don't discuss it again. And if you agree, we will not discuss this point again, then neither of the couple brings the topic again. Now, this let it go would be actually not only for the during phase, this would already be in the after. Yeah, we had been talking about the before and the during. This would already go into the after, but it's also for the couple, but particularly important. All right. I ran out of page, so I will not write here anymore. But let me give one overarching, really important rule of communication. Probably, to me, the most transforming one, the one that is more powerful that I received from Shiv Charan. Never say anything that is not necessary, kind, and true. So don't say anything that is not necessary, kind, and true. Let me write it here somewhere. Not necessary, kind, or true. Necessary, kind, and true. The three. This is, to me, one of the most important rules. And this kind of includes a lot of this. So a good way to practice this is to go one at a time. So to spend a whole week and not say anything that is not necessary. And you're going to find that you stay silent a lot. You will spend a very silent week, because you will stop before saying anything and check, is it necessary to say this? Maybe it's not. So I better don't say it. And you will end up very quiet for a week. And then you spend one whole week, whatever you have to say it kindly. Yeah, say it with kindness. And then you spend another week and say whatever you have to say, make sure that it's true. And some people say, oh, I never lie. Well, lies are sometimes masked in different ways. For example, when we exaggerate, that's a lie. When we minimize things, that's a lie. When we omit some things, that's a lie. So if you're going to say something, let it be truth. So necessary, kind, and true. So after exploring 1 week of each, then whenever you are in front of a situation, check. Is it necessary to say it? Is it true? Then let me say it kindly. But if it doesn't comply with one of the three, I'm not going to say it. And that's going to ensure, first, because you have to check for these three things, it ensures the communication is conscious, first of all. Second of all, you avoid karma, a lot of karma by going into this. You're going to find yourself much more silent. Silence is not bad. You can take the opportunity to put a mantra in yourself. You just keep a mantra repeating to protect you from saying what you don't want to say. Because sometimes you may experience somebody's hooking you. They're throwing in they're baiting you and trying to catch you, hook you, and you don't bite, Ardaas, don't say it, don't do anything, don't say it. And then you say it, and then it's a mess. Then we go into a battlefield, right? So is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? And stop yourself from going into that kind of communication. So necessary, kind, and true. That's a really, really important one. Now, I will come back now to something I mentioned at the beginning. I was talking about building rapport, and I mentioned how sometimes we need to build this rapport through a conversation that is not relevant or is not to the topic that you have to discuss with that person, but you're not talking about, namely small talk. Well, small talk sometimes is necessary. So maybe the other one is going to talk to you about the weather, and you say, well, do I really need to talk about the weather? Why should we talk about the weather? We have this issue so important that we have to talk about. So we have to be able to calibrate. Yeah, the weather is not important, but it is important that we are breaking the ice. Ice is weather, okay? We're breaking the ice to establish the rapport and to establish the empathy to have this communication. So sometimes to talk about unnecessary things is necessary. So that's a paradox that you're going to explore. But don't go too quick into that, okay? Try to spend a whole week, not say anything necessary, and then slowly you will realize that there are moments when it's necessary to have unnecessary conversations. Then there will be moments when you will realize that the kind thing to the soul of the person is to say something that is unkind to their ego. And sometimes it's necessary to do that. And with the true also, you're going to have to explore what is truth, because there's like 3 levels of truth: personal, circumstantial, and then there's universal truth. And that's also another thing that we have to evaluate as we are communicating. Necessary, kind, and true. That's very important. Now, apart from all this, there's the how you communicate, a few basic yogic tools as well. One is always speak from the navel, through the heart, whatever you have to say. The navel is going to give it power so that your words can have an impact, and your heart will give it warmth, and it will be more compassionate and empathic than if we just say them from the navel. But Yogi just said, any communication that is not from the navel brings disease, sickness, sorrow, madness, insanity, and even bad luck. So that's kind of funny. If we speak from other places that is not from the navel, you're going to have bad luck. But that's the way he would put it. And so we speak from the navel to have the power in the voice. We speak through your heart, and we speak to the heart of the other one or to the soul of the other one. And that's a good tip as well. When you have the other person in front, you can just say that to their heart or say that to their soul, as if you are speaking to their soul. And you can see their ego in between, and you can just go through and speak to the soul of the other person. There is many more tools here applying from Karam Kriya. If you remember the last video where we saw the face and we saw the different quadrants of the face, you can also try to speak to one of the quadrants, to speak to that side, that corner of the head of the person, or try to speak to this side of the face, or try to speak to their cheeks. It sounds crazy. I am aware of how you may hear these words, that if you speak to somebody's cheeks, they will hear it differently, but try it. You can also experiment to speaking from this point. See how it feels, how the other one receives it. It's kind of crazy, it's magical, but you can try to adjust, especially if the communication is not working, if there's something lacking and somehow you're not getting through. You can try to also change the angle of your head to project your voice with a different angle, to find the place from where your voice can be received. Sometimes there's too many obstacles in the communication. So there's these little tricks that one can apply, speaking from a different chakra as well. I always say from the navel, but you can activate the different chakras as you speak. And I have a whole video on that. You can check in the channel from which chakra do you communicate or something like that. I can't remember the title of the video, but communicating from different chakras. And that's a whole video on how to project from different chakras. What's the karma and the dharma of every chakra and that particular communication. That's also very useful. And one last thing I will share that is from Yogi Bhajan. This is from the manual of level 1, Kundalini Yoga Teacher Training. My level 1 manual is, don't be scared, okay? Because this is a very old manual. This is my original first manual that I had, and it's full of notes. So you will see, this is quite a mess, but I take so many notes. These are the 10 secrets of success. And I'm going to go here. We're going to go to the other page. So let me just cover it so it doesn't distract you. And harmonious communication. Let's read these 5 rules of harmonious communication that Yogi Bhajan taught. 1. You are communicating for a better tomorrow, not to spoil today. That's interesting. If I'm going to engage into a communication with somebody, can I be aware that there is a future with this person? And we are going to have to meet for a number of times, possibly, most likely, that we are going to meet this person again. So be careful what you say, because you will come back. So make sure that you're not spoiling what's happening. It's like for a better tomorrow. Whatever you're going to say is going to live forever, and you have to live through it. Therefore, take care you don't have to live through the mud of your own communication. That's something I learned a lot, and I practice it a lot doing these YouTube videos. I'm very aware that I'm being recorded, and I have to be conscious and responsible and affirmative. Say, yes, I'm saying these words. I take responsibility for them. I will make mistakes. Someday in the future, I will say, oh, well, that thing that you said, Ardaas, was wrong. But that's okay. I'm saying them. So I'm taking ownership of my own words. So can we do that consciously when we talk? Imagine that you are being recorded. Imagine that somebody is with a recorder and they can play it in the future. Can you speak? That's going to make you much more conscious. The third, one wrong word said can do much more wrong than you can even imagine or even estimate. Yeah. I've had relationships which were broken in one word. Yeah. I've had situations where somebody would say a word and I had been for maybe years with that person. And that word said in that way, in that context, reveals so much about that person and about how much they care about me. And I felt at that moment the relationship was dead. In that very instant, the relationship was dead and very painful. And then realized the power of words. One word said can destroy. And you know, sometimes we get angry or sometimes we get very reactive and we say things that we don't mean. But beware, what comes out through the gate, what comes out through the mouth, that can have an incredible impact. Much more than we can imagine or even estimate. It can also go the other way around. I've had some student come to me and say, one class that you gave 5 years ago, you said those things and it really touched me. Or, you said that sentence to me after a class and that really touched me. And I haven't seen the student for years, but they came especially to tell me how important it was for them. I didn't even remember that I had said that, but those words, no? And I have said also, I mentioned that I had experiences where somebody said something painful to me, but I've also done that. I have said things and then regretted it, feeling like I shouldn't have said those words, and feel that you're creating mud for your communication. Satnam Isabel, hello. Just quick hello, I'm probably off topic, but it's my day off today and I was experimenting with the sounds with another mantra course video and the live has arrived. It's fun. Wairu, yes, wonderful. Yes, I have been away for a few weeks and I'm back from holidays. So Isabel, next week I will be doing, and Isabel and everyone, I will be doing a series of videos on the Yoga Sutras. So I'm looking forward to exploring the Yoga Sutras and I will be much more active than I have been in the previous weeks. But yeah, mantra course is great. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for writing. All right, let's go to the rule 4. And Isabel, you can watch the rest of the video later if you want. Rule 4. Words spoken are a chance for communication. Don't turn them into a war. Yeah, we already mentioned this in the text that we did. And then rule 5, when you communicate, you have to communicate again. Don't make the road rough. Don't make the road rough. What does this mean? It means we say something and we very often have to repeat it. Maybe the other person doesn't understand it, doesn't get it, or they forget it, and you have to say it again. And sometimes you have to say it again. As a teacher, particularly, I find myself having to repeat things many, many times. It's a good practice to try to repeat things in a different way with different words for the different context or the different person that you have in front. But to know this, if you communicate, that's to establish a relationship, which means you're going to have to communicate again. So be patient and persistent in the communication. And like he says, don't make the road rough. So whatever you say, let it be to build a better tomorrow and not to create challenges for yourself later on. Well, this is it. These are the rules. I hope you... I think there is many more than this, but I think this is a good overview of some very basic ones. I invite you all to explore this necessary, kind, and true and explore it, but all of them are useful, so you can choose which one do you want to work on. I wonder, what are the rules that you know? What rules of communication would you learn or that you applied, that you learned in your life? And I would be very happy to hear them, so write them in the comments of the video. And I'm going to be compiling them because it's something that I'm very interested about. And I will add them to my list and we can discuss them in the comments on the video. So, but that's it for number 5. Again, this is only an introduction on number 5. We can do so many more videos on number 5. I was writing topics for number 5 and I think I only cover 10 videos. We did 10 videos. But I have so much more that we're going to explore in some other time because we have to move on to number 1. So we did number 7 and number 5 in numerology. We're going to go into number 1, but before we do that, as I mentioned, we will explore some of the Yoga Sutras and some of the videos that I have pending. Some people suggested things in the comments and I haven't done them, like the law of attraction. Somebody was asking about it and I haven't replied to that comment because I was thinking, I need to do a video about that. So we will talk about that soon. But for the moment, the chapter of the number 5, I consider it closed right now. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone who supports the channel, like Isabel. Thank you for everyone who shares these videos. And until next time, take care, Sadnam.